Painful. It wasn't even about a belief, Sean. It was about pain. I was 29, about to turn 30 when our first child was born. And I was sitting in this office and I was smoking a cigarette and eating a double cheeseburger and hating music. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? And I realized there was something trying to get out. And if I let it die, basically had this moment of like, I have to find a way to do this. I have to find a way.
I was at least partly inspired to start my own podcast because of today's guest. He has a podcast, a hit podcast. It's called The Moment. And that podcast proved when he started it back in 2013 that there really was a space for people who wanted to have authentic discussions around art and change and self-discovery and all the things that we like to talk about here on Next. This dude, I look up to him so much, even though he's of my generation. Every time I hear him talk, I learn so much. Anyway, my guest today, along with his writing partner, have created some of the most entertaining, popular, seminal TV and film projects in the last 20 years. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very excited. Brian Koppleman is next.
Look at all those books. Have you read them all?
You know, I do. Probably not all of them, but I do fucking read a lot, man.
Yeah. You still find time?
I really love to read, so it like takes me to a different place, and anything that makes me be really present and not have my brain wandering is great. And books, when I'm in a good book, that's how I am. So yeah, man. Yes.
I used to read a lot. I'm trying to get back into it again. I just found years of reading other people's scripts and the work involved in that. It just took the love out of it for me. It took the love out of narrative stuff, fiction. I'm starting to get back into it because you approach it from a different place, right? And it's hard to just be an audience again. It's hard to stop looking at how it works, how the sausage is made. That's what I found.
I wonder though, Sean, if there's some kind of other defenses up, because I find that as I get older, going through like the emotional cost of reading is very high, of fiction in particular, because fiction requires a kind of an openness as a reader and a willingness, I think, to really feel and to really crack yourself open. And I bet you that sometimes reading for work, all sorts of defenses are going up. Yes, you want to be able to be open when you do the work, but especially for reading stuff, you don't know if it's going to happen, or it's like
it's full of self-interest.
You don't want to get really lost into it as an actor until you know you can play the part, until you know you got the part and it's happening and it's financed. And so there's a little bit of, and then I also do think as we get older, everything that's worth reading in some way has to do with our impermanence. And that is, when you're younger, that impermanence is theoretical. And as you get older, that impermanence is not theoretical at all. And I think that's part of what makes fiction and great work, and deciding, okay, I'm going to go watch this Cuarón movie. I'm going to put myself watching this because you got to make a decision. I think that it's worth it to go through harrowing interior experiences through art. And of course it is. That's why we make art, but that's why we wanted to from when we were little, or from whenever we decided some kind of connection to that material. But I think as you get older, you become more well-defended in certain ways. And I think it might serve a part of daily existence, but I don't think it serves our continued growth. And so I try really hard to remind myself and to remember to, allow those experiences to happen and seek them out even.
I think that's why you've been such a hero to me for so many years since we first met, which was over 20 years ago now. Because it seems to me that you've always been aware of that impermanence, and you've been voraciously curious with everything that you've ever done and everybody that you've ever met. And I think it's a unique quality in someone, particularly someone of your power and your influence and the prolific amount of work you've done. You've managed to hold on to that, and It's like the whole podcasting, right? The authenticity of what you do in your podcast, which is now more commonplace. But when you started that in 2013, there weren't many people out there that were genuinely curious and genuinely seeking inspiration and insight. And you've managed to just hold on to that for your entire career, which is just astounding.
Thanks, Sean. I mean, nobody's, I can never live up to being exactly the person I am on the podcast, right? I mean, because that's me at my most focused, best, most curious, most engaged, most alive, trying my best to like really be there with the person.
Sure.
And in life, when the pressures hit along the way, you try to hold on to all that stuff, and yes, you return to it, and you as you know, I have practices that allow me to get to those kind of places. But let's just, I want to just say, I mean, it's funny because when we met, you emailed me, and I don't think it would have been possible or texted me to say yes faster to come in and do this with you. And you seem surprised at how available I was for this and for you. And I just want to say, like, we met, and I mean, David and I were pretty overmatched trying to direct our first film. And it was an incredibly special experience, but it was really a challenging experience. And we lived through some really challenging days together, days where my and David's inexperience made things probably, we couldn't see through certain things that maybe a more experienced filmmaker would have. We were learning how to block, right? We were way different by 4 weeks in than we were by 2 weeks in, but
yeah.
And you worked early because you worked throughout the whole picture, because you were there in Western Canada with us, because there were exteriors we had to shoot there, right?
That's
and
right.
Then you were back in Toronto with us as well.
And
then in New York, and then you were in New York with us. So you were in a whole series of parts of that film with us. And I'd say David and I very quickly realized you were somebody we could count on, that you could do this work, that you were there to be great, that you were there prepared. You weren't going to ask stupid questions that were just for distraction purposes or to procrastinate. If you had a question, it was a useful question. And so, when you're a filmmaker, when we do these things together, first of all, it is one of the things you wish people outside of the industry could experience, which is you come together and do something like that, no matter how hard it is, you come out of it with a certain kind of bond. And you can see people you made a movie with 15 years ago, and the moment you see them, you're connected to them. And it's a weird, amazing, and it doesn't mean somebody had to be on the thing someone could come and do 2 days. And if they do 2 days in a way where you connect, that bond is there, like, for a really long time in a very deep way.
But I think that's something that's a special characteristic. First of all, I'm so humbled and so grateful you would come on. So thank you for that, and thanks for the kind words. But I was just talking to a dude last night, a friend of mine who worked on your show Tilt, and he said, "Oh my God, that guy's so nice. He did this thing where I came in, and then they liked what I did, but I wasn't right for the role, so they kind of created another little role for me, and I came on and I fucking blew it. I blew the role, unfortunately, but they were so nice to me. Anyway, he has a whole monologue about
which guy was it?
It was Joris Jarsky. I might have to.
Oh, he's such a sweetheart, that guy.
Yeah, he is a great guy.
He's a sweetheart.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think he ended up doing a few episodes. I know what happened. Chris, he gets like beat up, I think, by this one character. Yeah.
He's his own worst enemy, of course. But by
the way, yeah. I mean,
like, okay. 2 examples from when we did that film together that have stuck with me all these years. The first one was, I was nervous as hell, man. I was, starting with you. It was early in my career, and you were obviously, like you just said, overmatched, you and David, and yet you had the time to connect and talk. And we had this conversation about acting and the acting class that I was in at the time, and a particular thing. And we had a laugh over a particular teaching that this teacher had. And I remember feeling how connected we were and how present you were in that moment, being able to talk about, just shoot the shit about something so specific. When, like you said, you're trying to figure out how to block, you've never been on a set in the same way before. And so that was one memory. The other memory I have is when we were shooting in Toronto, I come in and I put a gun on John Malkovich. And John Malkovich has a swing around and basically say, hey, take the gun down or something. And I don't know what the hell happened. I wasn't taking the gun down fast enough for him. He needed a justification why he didn't shoot me or something. I'm assuming all of this because he had conversations with you and David about it. And it was clear that it was me holding the gun up that was holding him up somehow. And I went to you and I said, what's up? I can help, man. Tell me what's going on. You're like, no, don't worry about it. And so for me in that moment, I saw someone who was, in spite of the fact that it was John Malkovich and I'm just this dude from Toronto, you were willing to advocate for me as much as you were for him. And that's something that I have seen throughout your career. Like there's an egalitarian notion about who you are, and it's all about being an artist, and it's about everybody's on the same playing field. That's why, in some ways, I'm not surprised, even though I was blown away that you responded so quickly to come on. So I don't know if you can speak to that, but
no, thanks. I mean, well, probably I'd say one thing is your perception of John and my perception of John are probably not exactly the same, right? Because John is like this incredibly dear friend of mine and a hero of mine, and I know he's also an acting hero of yours, and but he and remember, John doing David and me the solid of saying yes, got the movie greenlit, and we had made Rounders together, and I mean he's remained just a steadfast and loyal friend, and he was also the whole time we were making that movie, he was quietly trying to bail us out. And if he saw somebody lying to us, if he saw somebody doing something that wasn't going to serve the picture, somebody in the producing world of the thing, or somebody on the crew trying to pull one over on us, he was constantly just quietly trying to help us. And because he'd been doing it for 20 years, and we were engaged in a lot of different levels of conversation with John, and that sequence, part of what was happening that day, and I don't really remember that particular moment you're talking about, but I mean, I know what happens between your character and his character. But back then, when you were going to do someone getting shot, you had to use like wire squibs, and I remember we had wired Arthur Nascarella, and he gets shot and he does this great kind of fallback, but when he fell back, the wire was visible. And so we were having all these but to reset, because for the people listening, like, there and it's not as bad now because most of this you do totally differently now. But back then, if you were going to do that, you'd have to take these kind of live squibs that would be wired into the person's outfit. But then you also had blood capsules, right? So that either popped or that he would hit. So you had all this stuff, and if you had to redo something like that, you had to. The actor had to go get dressed. Everything had to get clean up around him. The stuff had to be put. So you're just talking about hours. And I remember that day fighting with people to try to just get that done. That's part of what I mean about the experience. Like at the time, each of those moments, probably Dave and I were so like, is someone going to try to shut us down before we get this thing? And we can't live with that thing, because to rotoscope that out back then would have cost so much, the wire. Yeah. And so you're thinking about a million different things, and probably the staging acting part definitely would have been the thing I was understood the best and would have been the most eager to deal with. And also, Sean, because of the way you approached it, because there were a lot of guys our age, roughly our age. How old are you? Or how old are you, Sean?
I'm 2 years younger than you, I think. 54.
Right. So we were all around the same age, basically, except John. There were a couple, John and Nascarella, a couple older guys, and Noonan. But basically, there were 5 or 6 of us who were, and some of those people at times were demanding in different ways, and you were there to do the work. And so and for some reason, Levien, me and you, as different as our paths were and all that stuff, and our paths to get there, we shared somehow an awareness of the absurdity of some of what was going on around us. And so there were moments when we would meet eyes and just be like looking at sort of it. I think the 3 of us understood in a weird way the opportunity, and that not privilege in the way people use it, but actually just like, holy shit, we're getting it, dude. We're actually doing this thing. And you were not taking it for granted, and we were not taking it for granted.
But that's carried through with you up till now. I mean, I worked with you a few years ago on Billions, and you had the same attitude, the gratitude. The gratitude.
I do. No, I mean, it's an amazing thing to get to do. And no, that was such a thrill for Dave and me. getting to have you come back, because that, we'd always thought about it, and then at other times maybe, because of where you were based or where we were working, but this time we were just like, just find a way to bring Sean in. We want him for this part. We're going to make it really fun and good. And when we bring someone in who is going to come in and do a thing like that, especially when we know them or when we love their work, we're going to make sure they have like, a really cool moment in the show. And yeah, that was a blast, man, having you come back. I mean, I remember driving up to that place because I just want to make sure to see you. And Dave and I both came up there, and you really delivered for us, and you're great in the episode. You really make the thing work. And yeah, it was super fun, man. How's it all been going? Are you still enjoying the work part of this as much as you have over the course of when we've intersected?
I would say that I'm in a real kind of inflection point now, which is probably why I've started this podcast. They say there's no small parts, there's only small actors. There's small parts. That's what I discovered. In the sense that, I mean, I don't know, you're likely not that familiar with most of the work that I've done here in Canada, obviously. And I've had great opportunities, like I've done really, really great roles. I've been really blessed. I've had a great career. But after a while, when that S curve starts to flatten out a little bit, it just becomes, the questions have started to come up about where should I be right now? What am I doing? What, how do I continue to invest in being an artist and being curious and seeking? And the cynic in me, has come into play a lot more than I would care to admit. And so yeah, I'm working through that kind of stuff. It's interesting because I just we were to do this yesterday, but I had an important callback for a thing, and it's someone that wrote on a show that I was the lead in 25 years ago. She's now show running this thing, and I really put myself into a beginner's mind place and auditioned twice for it. And yesterday, it wasn't a great callback. Sometimes you're there, sometimes you're not there. Sometimes your feet are on the ground, sometimes they're not. But those experiences always make me realize how much I fucking love doing what I do.
That's the thing. Like,
yeah,
having the courage to give it everything, even if sometimes you're gonna,
and it's heartbreaking when you do that.
Yeah, even if sometimes you're gonna flame out because of whatever the reason is. I mean, you are too good an actor to ever go in and not feel like you delivered. And I wonder.
Well, it's worse when you don't flame out, but you just are flat. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but then, can't you walk outside and say, give me a half hour and get your shit together?
I suppose I could ask.
You can.
Yeah, you can. I've done that in the past.
Can. But you can, especially like someone who's worked a long time and it's not high maintenance. If you need to do something like that, if you need to leave an audition and text the person, especially if you know them, and go, I was flat. I've been thinking about how to attack it. I know how to attack it. Can I come back and try one more time? I have had these conversations.
Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. I have had in the span of my career maybe 2 experiences with directors that wasn't entirely positive. And so I found out the night before this callback that the director of this pilot is one of those 2 people. And so I showed up. I have a person that I work with. And so the night before we did work on it, and, I got myself in a place and felt very grounded when I started. And, but I just allowed myself to give over power in that moment once we started, because she was not receptive. Or at least that's what I perceived of her, which could all be in my mind, but that's what I feel. And so I was adrift at the beginning. At least I found my way, I breathed and whatnot, but so I don't know. That wasn't a situation where I felt like I need a bit of time. I'm going to go away, come back another day, or go away for a few minutes or anything. But anyway, let's get back to you, man. I want to talk to you about.
But this is about me. I'll say this is about me. But I'll tell you what. Let me flip it, and then let me flip it to make it about me.
All right.
Because this process, as we go deeper into our careers, so much of it is about like what's worth getting it going for in that way, and
that's a big one.
And it is easy to default to like nothing's worth it, and it's easy to default to I'm tired of this shit, and the business almost systematically devalues us and our contributions. And also, right, the whole thing about this.
Do you still feel that?
Well, no,
do you still feel that?
The whole thing about this is the whole thing is we all want to be seen fully for who we are, for our best of what we have to offer. And I try to come into each interaction ready to see people for who they are. But again, I could have just gotten off the phone with the head of a network or with a teacher at my kid's school when they were young, and maybe I'm not ready to do that. And that sucks for the person that I'm going to interact with. And it's not fair. Maybe that's pressures of the day, but ultimately this work is worth it. Do I feel that way now that I'm not, that the industry devalues? Well, first of all, you're always like every age that you've ever been in a way, and you're always every preferred version of yourself you've ever been. And so, no, of course I understand when I walk into a room now, I carry a body of work that I've done with me and people are aware of it. I'm not delusional about that. I understand that, right? On the other hand, as a writer, much like as an actor, I got to deliver on the page for myself. I got to deliver on the page for myself, right? And then as a filmmaker, I got to deliver on the day, and I mean every part of it, and in the editing room. So it's I don't like when people falsely use the word humble, but the work, if you approach the work like with your best self, the work itself, it never is as good as you hope and want and dream. That feeling that's in your head, it's very difficult to, only a few times in your life does the feeling actively get through to all the way. So
that feeling in your head, though, is it still as strong? Like, do you still have the same impetus to write that you've always had? Is it fueled by different intention, or?
The songwriting helps a lot, the other, like songwriting really helps because beginner, like you said, the beginner mind, like there's something so valuable about not knowing. And there's something so valuable about the process of getting your craft to meet that feeling, because the feeling in the beginning of an artistic career, that feeling is the thing that drives you. But then the need to say something, or you see something in the world, and that gives you a certain feeling, and in trying to understand even what that means, you're going to create work. But in the beginning, and then you're and that feeling can carry craft on its back.
Hey, I'm jumping in here for 1 second to say, if you're enjoying this conversation, do me a solid, hit the like button and subscribe. I promise you there's going to be some great conversations coming up that you're not going to want to miss. And your engagement to this channel will help push it out to more people. Also, leave a comment. What are your favorite projects from Brian and David? Is it Billions? Is it Rounders? Is it Super Pumped recently? The Uber story? Let me know. Thanks.
And then there's a moment where like the craft and the feeling are kind of like helping each other up the mountain. But I don't, and what's underneath your question is, it's not great when the craft is leading. The craft needs to serve the craft needs to serve the spark. And the answer to your question is, yeah, man, I won't fake the funk. So I learned at a certain point in our career, Dave, in my career, I realized that the rewriting, and David realized too, but I'm not going to speak for him, but I realized that like some of these rewriting jobs that Hollywood would pay decent money for, I'm not going to use words like soul killing or like overly dramatic shit. I would say what I realized was I'm only excellent when I'm working from a place that really activates my point of view. And if I don't have a real point of view on something, if I don't care enough to really have a take, not a take like, oh, I think they would, the bank robbers would wear that. I'm saying if I don't have like a point of view on a situation, a character, a story, then I'm just like any other reasonably smart person who's written for a long time. There's nothing special that I'm going to bring if I don't have a point of view. There's no reason to have me do that work if I don't have a point of view on something, which can be, that point of view can be found through research, through just pure emotional reaction, lots of different ways. But so, and when that would happen, it would feel very dead to me. I would feel like I'm just kind of deploying a skill set. I'm not working as an artist. And
that happens a lot to actors. guns for hire, you know. I mean, that's a constant struggle for us to balance the times when we legitimately have a connection to the roles and other times when we need to just do it in order to
I
keep
would say as an
working.
actor, maybe you can find though, like, oh wait, something that could connect you. Like,
Oh, you find a connection, of course, but it's like if you've written, let's take Rounders or something, which is
yes,
such a which I want to talk about obviously in more detail, but
sure, anything you want.
you have such a palette of humanity in all those characters. So obviously they're reflecting your POV, and then you're hired to go and do a sci-fi thing. You're going to have to manufacture for yourself the humanity within a world building context, for example, right? Like that's a job, that's a chore, and you have to use your craft to do it, and ultimately it'll take your talent to make that connection. But like that's jobbing it. That's so I guess that's what I mean when I
Yeah,
talk
but
about
that's
actors.
so it's a perfect point. Now, but here's the thing, right? There are people who like that is what fires them up, and those are the people who should write that movie. And so there are people that it's not in any way. I mean, I have a lot of friends. Like I was once talking to David Kopp, who's one of the greatest screenwriters ever lived.
Yeah.
And when I hear him talk about writing big actions, like, you know, he wrote that sequence when Tom Cruise and Ving Rhames are in the first mission when they're hovering above the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I once called him up and I was like, can you walk me through that? But I was writing an action sequence and I was like, what are you? And just even the way he talks about it, like that guy wanted to make movies because he watched those things partially. He loves them. He loves thinking about them. He understands the story of them. Like that is not jobbing it for that guy. That guy,
No.
why he's the best in the world at that? Because he loves that.
He digs
but
it.
If I were doing, and I love Mission Impossible, like I could write, Dave and I could definitely write a Mission Impossible movie, but the part of it that we would write be the part of it that would be for me the challenging part. I mean, it's very hard, the plotting and all that, but I wouldn't mind that. That'd be fun. But the action stuff, the pure action stuff, it's not what I really connect to. And so I wouldn't take a job where that was the dominant thing. But you can, I would say, same thing as an actor. If you're working for a good, like a great writer, sometimes for a writer, and obviously I'm not like I know I'm a producer, director, writer, all that stuff, but I think the way you come into it is probably the way you first think of it. So for me, writer is first, right? So, but for me as a writer, an actor can be the thing that I connect to. And right. That's amazing. You know, I love Cruise as an actor, and I've gotten to meet with him and almost work together. But there, you know, if Chris McQuarrie and Tom ever, and Chris a friend, and he's, you know, if those guys, I would, it almost, you know, it would be locking into the film character of Tom Cruise. It would be enough to make it like, I have a point of view on that. I know exactly what I want to see him do. I know the situations I'd want to put that character in. And that's enough. Like, that's why, like, oh, you know, when we got the call from Steven about, or when we met with Steven about Ocean's 13, it was like, oh yeah, that's a no brainer. Because well, we studied cons. We love movies about, you know, con artists. We, and the palette, Steven Soderbergh, that anything that guy wanted to do, because like, working with an artist of that caliber, so there's lots of ways you can lock into it. I think I'm really talking about, you know, you get a call to work for 4 weeks on a movie like Walking Tall, and we did it, and but it was like, and I'm glad I got to, you know, have writing credit on a movie that The Rock starred in. That's fun. I'm a fan of his, but that kind of job isn't.
Yeah, it's not your
best
go-to
thing. First of all, what I realized for me is I like writing people smarter than me. Some people like writing people dumber than them. Some people I like writing about people smarter than I am. That's really fun for me. And I think that's me having that fun is what translates it to the audience and makes it fun for the audience. That I'm somebody who really enjoys it. Like the other night, this will connect, I think. The other night, my son was having dinner. He's a grown person, but then he was having dinner with some people. And Amy and I were in the car, and he called me, and they're out they live in Brooklyn, and they're out in the backyard at their place or whatever in Brooklyn. And he's like, will you tell this certain joke? And first I definitely had to make sure they weren't in public. And then I was like on a speakerphone. I said, yeah, sure. I'll tell. And I just started telling the joke, and Amy was with me. And like, So we're driving and I'm telling this joke and I'm not in person. It's real hard to tell a joke over speakerphone. It's whatever. But I could tell, as I just made a decision to really commit to telling the joke, and it's one of these long Shaggy Dog stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I could feel that like I was enjoying the whole moment of it so much. And I knew that it was like translating. And so I hit the punchline and everyone died. But afterwards, and it was like, because I was fully in and found it funny and entertaining. I hadn't told that joke in a long time, and the absurdity of it. And like that feeling, which is this thing that we get to have sometimes, which is being kind of in on the thing as we're doing the thing and getting off on it. That's the feeling I want all the time when I'm working. And then as an actor, I'm sure that's the feeling you want all the time, which is all the insecurity.
And when you share, when you can share that feeling with your collaborators, and also you know that it's going to be shared with the audience, right? Like you have an instinct that is.
Yeah, you feel that it's translating.
Yeah.
You can feel it going through the air. And I mean, that's
right.
one of the amazing things for me when as a showrunner is being there and being in the editing room or being on set and just understanding how it's going to land a year from now. And having now learned over the long period of time, doesn't mean it's always going to work and all that stuff. But the moments you know it's going to work, it really works. And those are incredible moments. You're present and you're also aware of sort of what's beyond where you're present. I mean, I have to feel like House of Cards must have been that for you. Like you must have known that must have been fun to work with all those terrific actors and to be sort of in that spot. I'd have to think every day you were going to work. I mean, I'm sure it was very hard, but every day going to work must have been like, well, this is why I signed up for this. This is why I do this.
Oh, it was a thrill. It was a thrill. I mean, the biggest disadvantage with that show is that you're asked to come in and do it, and you don't know what it's going to be, right? So you just say yes. You don't say, well, tell me what's going to happen. I want Fincher to get on the phone and describe what my arc is going to be.
Right. You mean so you don't know going in exactly who you're playing?
Well, I knew I had some sides that I taped with, basically, so I didn't really know where it was going to go, and that's a little unsettling, but it's also exciting in a way. The biggest story for me was I did a series here when I came back from LA in Canada that had a lot of critical acclaim, but it was canceled after 1 year. But then Hulu picked it up in the States, and they were going to finance a second season, but it was, they didn't pull the trigger. So they took me off the market, or the production company took me off the market. And I had auditioned for the original House of Cards, the original cast of that first season. And I was first choice for a character in that, but I couldn't do it because I was contractually off the fucking market. And, these things happen. And I was very happy to be on that show ultimately. But I think, I've had a few of those, but we all have, I'm sure. Those things happen all the time. So I wanted to talk. You were talking about point of view, and
yes,
I've got a whole list of questions here, and So the point of this podcast is really about trying to understand the intersection between curiosity and courage, and achieving clarity about when you need to make transitions in your life, right? When you need to rethink things, how you move. The original title for the podcast was The Shift, but because I'm such a fan of your podcast, The Moment, I went, man, I can't. That's way too close to Koppleman's title.
It's all fine. I mean, obviously, I understand that I'm glad. You know what, man? Because obviously the thing you're talking about is the thing that drove the first 3 or 4 years of my podcast. And but I think that I was in a spot you're in, meaning I was trying to understand it for myself because I was trying to understand it for myself. And so I was trying to ask people because I was a little bit adrift, and it was very useful. And then it became useful for people like you listening. So I love that you're talking about this stuff.
It's awesome. It helped you. Like you set off
all
with
that, the vines, all that stuff.
The vines
tremendously. Of course it helped. Yes, all helped.
A couple of things for the listener. The vines, Brian decided to give screenwriting tips in, what was it, vines, 15 seconds, whatever the hell they were.
6-second screenwriting lessons. Yeah.
6-second screenwriting lessons. And you did, I don't know how many of them, hundreds of them, thousands of them. Yeah. And Yeah, you've always had this. You've always had this desire to express yourself with the purpose of helping, man, being of service. And that's another big theme for me, is how can we be of service? And I see that, I even see it in your work. I feel like your work is like, if you talk about the themes of your work, common themes are things like loyalty and power and ambition and why is ambition such an enormous one for you? I mean, you grew up in a family that were you close with your dad? Your dad was a very prolific, powerful music
Yes,
producer.
I was. Oh yeah, I was really close with him.
Mm-hmm.
But it was so it's a lot of the themes, like a lot of the stuff comes from where David and I grew up. We grew up on Long Island, but we grew up around people who mythologize themselves and often were taking parts of themselves, figuring out how to use that to get to where they wanted to go by creating a myth of who they were. And yeah, my dad was really incredible at that and had an amazing skill set. He was also someone who, if he made $2, spent $3. And so there was a lot of sort of like awareness growing up that, and particularly as I got into high school and stuff, in college, that an open question of whether he'd be able to like kind of outrun it or whether it would all outrun him. In the end, it kind of all outran him. But he lived an incredible life, and I got to watch it, and I got to watch him skirt really close to the line of the law a bunch of times and stay just on the safe side of it.
So is that impact?
He was a great storyteller, and I got to watch him use that stuff in a professional context, and I mean, he was in the record business at the time. The record business was Wild West. He was in the record business at the time where, you would take a suitcase of cash and hand it to a guy, would hand it to a guy, would hand it to a guy at a radio station, and suddenly the record would be on the air. So wow. I got to see a lot of that and watch a lot of that, and as a kid, and I loved my dad, and he was an incredible. I'd say a lot of those kinds of guys were to kind of maybe the selfishness that was required professionally. A lot of people, that's the mode they lived in full time. My father was a great dad. He was not a great husband, but he was a great dad. And he really took the time with my sisters and me, really took the time to listen and talk and be there. So he would never miss a sports game that I played. And he was like super connected. And so that's the thing that was the really value. That was incredibly,
which you've carried on with your kids too in a major way.
Yes.
So just for the listener, I even wrote down a list here of some of the artists that your dad had impact on their careers: Billy Joel, Journey, Barbra Streisand, Dolly Parton, Diana Ross, Four Tops, Cher, Robbie Robertson, New Kids on the Block, Wilson, even Frank Sinatra at the end, right?
Oh yeah.
He brokered a deal
to put together that duets. He put together those duets.
Yeah, it's amazing. So how did you create your own sensibility for music that was different from his? Like clearly you were so influenced by him and his work. You would have had to be. So did you find it difficult to differentiate yourself?
Well, yeah, I think when you're a kid, I mean, one of the ways you express yourself is through your musical taste, right? And I think that when I was young, first of all, getting to go to the recording studio with him and be in sessions and watch him talk to lead singers, watching him talk to Barbra Streisand to get a vocal out of her was an enormous help to me in learning how to talk to an actor and help them get a performance.
No shit.
Because the things I would watch. Now, I wasn't watching analytically. I was 12, but it doesn't matter if I was watching analytically. I'd noticed. And he would sometimes then in the car ride afterwards talk to me about it. So, suddenly he would know when to say nothing or when to make her laugh, when to tell a joke, when to say, do you want food? Should we stop so you can eat something? Or when someone came in to bring food to say, don't even come in the room. And just watching that over and over again taught me a lot about what it is to engage in artistic work like that, right? And then I would also watch him. He would have just bags of tapes. Back then, sorry, the music was not on digital files, right? It was on these cassette tapes.
Yep.
He didn't have really a lot of the 8-tracks weren't what you would use for business. You would use cassette tapes. And so he would come home with these cassette tapes of songs that the songwriters he worked with had that would be for him to pitch to singers, and I would listen to those tapes with him, and then I would sometimes listen to them without him and then give him my recommendations on it. And that, I learned, it's an amazing thing, like learning what makes a good bridge in a song is also learning what makes a good third act reversal or something like that. Like it's all about understanding the value of how to tell a certain kind of story and a certain kind of construct. And I loved that shit, man. And then when I was 13, I got into heavy metal. It was great because it was a way I could be rebellious, and it was a kind of music that he didn't dig, and I could have music be my own thing. But obviously, I know, and I'm sure you said it in this moment in the world, I think one of the things that a thing I learned from him, and it's an incredibly valuable thing, is I learned how to walk into a room filled with powerful people and how to talk to powerful people. And that more than anything else, meaning people often think it's like having connections to people, but the turnover happens in all these industries pretty fast. But the thing is, learning how to speak to, back then, like largely the man in the chair, learning how to speak, watching my father go and have to go to the heads of record companies before he was and get stuff from them. And then sitting next to him when he was on the phone, or driving to New York City with him and getting to, sit next to him at a lunch meeting. I learned how to walk into a room and not be intimidated by that setting. And that is like a gigantic advantage. I also learned how full of shit so many of these people were, and the ways in which they were mythologizing themselves, and all their insecurities were really on display. And that stuff I started really like noticing, and David did too, growing up on Long Island and growing up, we grew up, together in a way. And so all that stuff informed all the work. When I was young in the record business, my first bunch of years, the thought of the differentiating myself was pretty big and difficult. But once David,
did you manage bands when you were in high school?
I did all that stuff.
Yeah. So you were just hungry to get into it early on.
And then, I had this incredible this incredible bit of fortune, right? When I found Tracy Chapman, that was just obviously all that training, so that when I was 19, I was prepared to understand what I was seeing. And that allowed, I think having that whole experience allowed me to move on to a different kind of life. I always wanted to be able to do that thing and make records in that way. But once that happened,
you said once that in one of your podcasts that you stopped working in the music industry because it just became competitive for you and you lost the love of it. You stopped being a fan.
Yeah. And I made sure that when I got into this, it would, because music was so important to me, and it was like my salvation in so many ways. And then, I got to a place where it had ceased to be that, because I was only thinking of it through the lens of business. And that made me real sad. A bunch of things happened though. Amy, my wife, I'm one of these lucky people who married the right person young, and she's a brilliant person and great artist in her own right. And she, when we were, I was 29, was like, "You're not happy doing this stuff. What do you want to really do? You should like take the risk of doing this other thing." So
were you writing all that time anyway? You were doing.
I was a blocked. I had the bad ADHD, and I was a blocked writer because I could never finish anything. And the ADHD, which I've talked about in other places a lot, but essentially, it's a very crippling thing when you're young. And there's a big sort of gulf between your capability that you have in a certain way, and then your inability to manifest it. And sometimes late at night I would write, but I would only show Amy, and she'd see like a paragraph, and I couldn't do any more than that. And I always knew, like even in school, I could write a couple of pages that were, I was lucky that I had a certain talent for that. That's hard to explain. I loved words. And so I had a talent, but I couldn't do anything. Couldn't finish anything.
So you clearly had to make a conscious choice, right? To make a transition into writing, but you had a belief in yourself, even though you could only write a certain amount, or you couldn't get it out of your head or your soul.
It got too painful. It wasn't even about a belief, Sean. It was about pain. What happened was, and I know you know this, but I'm sure your listeners don't, so I'll just tell it. I was 29, about to turn 30 when our first child was born, and I found myself sitting I'd never been a cigarette smoker. I'd never smoked a cigarette. Like I'd smoked plenty of pot, but I'd never smoked a cigarette. And I was sitting in this office and I was smoking a cigarette and eating a double cheeseburger and hating music. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? And I realized that I wasn't going to be able to be the kind of dad I wanted to be. I wanted to be the kind of dad who would tell his children to chase whatever they wanted to chase. And I wanted to be the kind of person who would come home from his workday with some kind of equilibrium intact or something like that. And I had the thought that if I allow this block, because I was clearly a blocked writer, and I was like, it's a kind of death if the creative impulse dies.
But you identified yourself as a writer.
All my friends were. I mean, it's slow, but I realized I identified myself as either a writer, a comic, an art like that. Like there was something trying to get out, and I was not allowing it to get out. And if I let it die, I would, like any other kind of death, it would be toxic and it would ooze out onto the people I loved, and I would become bitter. And Amy had been saying similar stuff to me, and I went to Dave was tending bar, and I basically had this moment of like, I have to find a way to do this. I have to find a way. And you know, Dave gave me The Artist's Way book by Julie Cameron. Started doing that. And then, you know, I was also playing a lot of poker. I walked into this poker club and then called him and said like, okay, I know what we can write a movie about. And as soon as we started, man, as soon as we actually got in, there's studies have been done about ADHD. And one of the things is when you have a teammate, it almost has a similar effect to the medicine. And you can see the studies about it, but a teammate's very helpful. Someone who's like, because you start to kind of their executive function kind of lives for you, and you can lock into it. It's hard. But as soon as we got in there and started writing, all my days were better, because even though we were writing for 2 hours, then I would go to work. That 2 hours of working from the most alive place made it easier to sit through meetings and deal with the bullshit of the day. And because something had gotten woken up and was moving, and everything changed from it, you know. And not everyone's going to have the exact same experience, but I think the same of success, like it's not going to go well exactly as it went for me. But the part of it that I think everyone can access is if you can find a way to figure out how to spend time in your day working from the place where you feel most alive and where there's a possibility of change. You have a chance to shift your inner life, and your inner life is like you're with that thing all day long. So you better figure out how to shift your inner life, you know. And that's what did it. And that doesn't mean you're never going to have bad days, or you're never going to be miserable or anything, or show business is frustrating, and any business is frustrating. But
I should have said this earlier. David Levien is your writing partner, who you've created all these amazing projects with.
Yes.
And you've known each other forever. And you were talking from point of view earlier. Clearly, two people who've grown up together have continually shifting points of view and perspective on the world and ideas. And how have you managed to
what's so much fun.
Yeah,
that's what's so much fun, right? Is like, because Dave and I trust each other. I mean, you've seen us together. Like, I mean, we're not even aware of it, but people who see us in the work environment say like we just can look at each other and the room changes, like without even speaking to each other, you know. We like, so right, once we're on the floor, I'm sure you've seen it, like we just don't disagree. We just, even if we disagree, like we're very unified. We're an incredibly unified thing. But yeah, man, I think part of what we've done always is when one of us has found something in the world, we share it with the other to this day, you know. So if I read a book or Dave reads a book or hears some new piece of music or sees a movie or whatever, we're constantly in that conversational flow. Hey, what do you think about this thing that's going on? Hey, this thing's happening in the world. Like, we're just talking about it, right? And so we're kind of
incorporating it into the work as it goes.
Yeah, we're forming a shared point of view. I mean, Dave told me this a long time ago when he was working on his first novel. He was like, when you get to a certain place in a piece, everything that you touch during the course of the day is filtered through it and ends up in it in some way. And I think that's what we're doing.
When you guys write, do you find that one takes over the weight of whatever the beats, the other takes over the weight of the dialogue? It's just a back and forth. Do you both do passes on a scene? Do you take one section?
We write them individual. We write the scenes separately.
Yeah. Okay, and then come together
and then we'll outline together, talk it through. But then we're sending documents back. We're just all day sending documents back and forth to each other. And so all day long, when we're not in a writer's strike, all day long, one of us is writing scenes. So that we'll outline the whole piece, right? And then we'll separate. One of us will go through the document and just put our initials. And so, I'll go, hey, any of these scenes that you particularly feel close to that you want to write? And usually Dave will say no. And then, or the same thing. And then one of us will just go through and put initials kind of every other scene. Or if if 2 scenes or 3 scenes are really connected in a run, then maybe one of us will do that whole little run first. But then once that's done, we rotate. One of us will then put that document together because there'll be 2 documents, right? One BK, one DL, and then they'll have half the scenes written. So one guy will put that document together and then go through the document and just sometimes we'll have each referenced something weirdly, like it won't be something we're talking about, but we'll reference the same movie or the same pro wrestler or the same whatever. And so you'll go through and kind of straighten that stuff out. And then, I'll look through and do a light pass on his scenes and he'll do the same on mine. Or having read his scenes, I'll be like, oh, there's 2 things I got to change in my scenes to make that marry. And then you just give it to the other. It'll be like, okay, that's done. It's up there for you. And then he'll grab it. And we just go back and forth like that. And then I guess right at the end, maybe of any of those documents, one of us might say, hey, tomorrow, let's open that document where we're both there and look at these 2 moments together. And we'll look at those 2 moments and see if we can beat what's there. And that's it. And I think for a long time, that's how we've been working. And
I have 2 process questions for you. One is, you just talked about it, that you both may insert the same reference coincidentally or whatever, you're on the same wavelength. So much of your work has so many cultural or musical or literary references. That's like a touchstone to your style.
Yeah, it's part of our voice for sure.
Yeah. Now, do you have the reference and then build around that, or does it come organically through?
No, so rarely. It's incredibly rare. A song, sometimes a song
can do that. Yeah.
And I'll carry the song around for a long time, right? The song will be on some playlists that are for the show. And occasionally a song can make a sequence work in a way that maybe you would have written that sequence. Maybe that story would have happened in different beats, but the song has the effect of making it work a certain way. But no, I'd say, maybe there'll be a cultural thing will just be up on the board for a long time.
Literally we want to address this somehow. How are we going to?
But it'll be more not like a reference to a movie or something, but like this idea of really wealthy people being decadent and eating ortolans. We'll have that idea up on the board for years. We did from season 1. We had that idea on the board. But then finding the story that'll serve that in the way that'll otherwise really the other way.
That'll serve this.
Serve this story. So just have that up, and you might never get to that. That might sit there for 7 years ungotten to. But no, like the movie stuff. Not usually that's part of the fun, right? Is of writing the scenes where you'll just have an idea and it'll make me or Dave think of something, and suddenly that'll go in, and it's kind of like the way we tell stories. It's just the way we tell stories, you know?
What about monologues, which are such an enormous feature of your style as well? Do you, clearly it relates to point of view, and it's something you need to fucking frame in a very specific way for an audience. You want to talk about something in a very specific way, but when you're writing it, do you like, I'm thinking of it in terms of esoteric notions, like the shape of it, the structure of it. Do you?
Oh yeah.
But do you see it as a vehicle for the actor? Do you see it as a vehicle for the character, or as a vehicle for the actor, or as a vehicle for your own voice, or all of those things?
Well, it's not. I'd say no. It's not. No, discovery. So that's the great thing about curiosity and discovery. If I really know what I think about something, I can tell you there's never going to be a monologue about that.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I mean, that's so boring. How would I make that interesting for myself or for Dave? Like,
yeah, if you're not searching for an answer,
yeah, you gotta have. Now, occasionally, like, okay, you might build a whole season knowing, all right, there are these two ways people think about a certain kind of capitalist right now. There are certain arguments. How can we give both characters the sides of this argument in a really convincing way? And probably within that, somebody will speak for a while. But then the way that conversation is going to happen, the best part, the most fun part, the part that's so alive, is writing the actual scenes, right? Because you're outlining, you're thinking about story, but the part that has the surprises, and the part that's alive, and the part that's like that thing of telling the joke where I'm enjoying it, so I know you're going to enjoy it, not in a self-indulgent way. And what I'm enjoying is getting to transfer this spark to you. And that you and I for a moment are going to be in the exact same place, thousands of miles away or whatever, because we're going to get to experience this moment together.
And it's like you have an awareness of being a conduit as opposed to
it's so
being
amazing
a creator
to do.
Right?
So in that moment, it's all of it, right? It's like, but part of it is that exploration. And sometimes, look, on a long running, like Giammatti and I were once standing outside of a night shoot. And, you know, sometimes night shoots can be miserable, but sometimes if you catch it just right, an outdoor night shoot on a perfect, like when it's not too, you know, on one of those nights, it's something we are so, those nights are just really very special and amazing. And the sort of, so there's one of these nights, Paul and I are standing outside in New York City under an awning, and the Hindenburg comes up, something about a dirigible. And he's just like, that would be fun to talk about. And as soon as he said that, we had a spot where we needed his character to make a really big, convincing speech to a body of people. And it was a very important thing. And we start talking a little bit about the Hindenburg, and the word dirigible comes up. And it's like, yeah, that's a great word. And so I think another writer wrote the draft of that episode, and I think I remember saying to them, when you get to that speech, don't worry about it. And because I was like, I know what that's going to be. And then that was like great, because I didn't know what exactly. And then the fun of writing that for him, knowing that it was
a shared spark
talking about that. And Dave was going to, and Dave and I just remember going back and forth, because you learn, I mean, that thing, the way that thing blew up and all the things about it, by getting to then do a deep dive on the Hindenburg, and really like, it's, I know what happened, but you don't know what happened. And you don't know what the place of the Hindenburg in German society at that time, like a ticket on that thing was like, everybody wanted to get on it and all this stuff. But so getting to do that that's a blast, man. And then also knowing, oh, that's going to really work. And I'll tell you, like, Paul had to make one of the longest speeches ever on the show. And it was in a big chamber in the real place where all the state representatives meet, and the governor in Albany. And I was getting calls. We weren't up there, and I was getting calls all day from the producers saying like they'd never seen an actor, because basically there were so many people that had to get covered. And Paul did that speech all day long, 100%. And I think part of that, look, that's because he's the best actor. He's just an incredible.
He's extraordinary.
He's so extraordinary.
Yeah.
But also, though, he thought
he was into it. Yeah.
He was into it. He knew where it came from. You know.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing is like super magical to get to do.
Yeah.
You know, as you know, like the thing you were in with Tom Noonan, Knock On Guys, once Tom took that part, it wasn't written for him, but then like kind of tightening it, making it for him. You know, when someone's really specific, when an actor's specific, like the way Tom is specific, it's incredibly fun as an artist, as a writer, as a director, as a producer, to like find a way to help that person score and to have it be somewhere within that person's thing, you know. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's a shared responsibility. Man, I could ask you questions forever. I just want to ask you two more. Okay.
Yep.
I want to talk about your, well, they're related really. So what scares you at this point? Are you running from fear? Or are you running towards something else? And how is your work with TM, Transcendental Meditation, and your morning pages and your own personal maintenance ritual, I suppose you could call it? How is that supporting?
You know, my wife's last novel starts with an epigraph that's taken from a song by, or it's in a nod to this song by one of my favorite songwriters, Slade Cleaves. And he has a line that says, everything you love will be taken away. And that's how Amy starts a book, with that line. And that's what scares me. Just the only thing that's, you know, I read a lot of Buddhist texts. I, you know, engage with said guru. Which I don't know if you've heard that episode. It's one of my favorite episodes of the podcast of mine. And, but you know, when you have children, you love them so much and you care so much, and just, I want to hold, you know, you want to give them all the freedom in the world, and yet you want to hold them close. So that is my fear. I don't have a lot of fear about the work. You always have fear.
Do you ever have fear that
the demand? Do you want to do it well enough? Go ahead, ask.
Do you ever have fear that you lose touch with your voice? I mean, really, that's kind of the context of this whole interview for me.
That just goes back to picking right. So if I feel that way, and that goes back to what I was starting to say about songwriting. Like, songwriting is great because I'm not.
What you're doing again, you know, now.
I write songs a lot. I take it really seriously, and but you know, there's a lot of failure at that, and not every song is a good song, and I'm not nearly as good a craftsperson as I am at the stuff that we do, and so that was where the fear of failure is. Of course, man, every time you're in the editing room looking at the first cut of something, you see the failure, right? So
yeah, there's a lot of fear there.
It's hard. There's failure all the time. I'm not scared of failure, though. Creative failure, that's part of being an art. Like, that's just the game that you signed up for.
What's compelling you to write songs, Brian? What's compelling you to do that and to you know, chase another form of expression?
Paying attention to, like, because that's the curiosity thing. That's paying attention to what you're curious about. So the song lyrics started showing up, so when they started showing up, it's like, well, you're going to follow that or not? Yeah, I'm going to follow it. Well, fuck, are you good at it? I don't know. And then, you know, you get little hints along the way that you're not nuts to do it. You know, I've gotten a bunch of people to sing songs that I've written and all that stuff, but it makes me feel good when I'm writing. I mean, the real thing is, like, when I'm writing songs, I can disappear. And that thing I talk about where I'm both, you know, barely tethered to the earth but hyper present at the same time. And that happens when I'm in a flow of writing a song, and it's a hard form because it's very restricted. Right.
Yeah.
And so I love that. I'm not scared. Once you're not scared of the failure artistic, I don't like failing artistically. Nobody does, but I've been reviewed. I've had horrible reviews. I've been great. I've like lived all that stuff. And I've lived, I'm not saying as a good artist, but I've lived as an artist for like a long enough time now. I have a body of work. And so there is a separation satisfaction is the wrong word, but it's, there's kind of a deep sense of knowing that, for better or worse, there's this body of work that's 25 years long. And that even when I wasn't in the mood, even when it was really hard, even when I thought I wasn't going to be good enough, I showed up and I did my part to create this work. And that, it's not the end result of it. It's not whether who liked it or who didn't like it. But I would show up, and then something existed where nothing existed. And that, to have done that for this long a period of time, and that's the same thing with the songs, by the way, but to have done that with that for this period of time takes the fear of that particular thing off the table. But I got to write a book. I have a deal to write a book, and I'm gonna, and I hope I can do it. Now, that's not fear, but it's unknown. It's uncertainty. And I guess I like that feeling.
You doing that now?
I ought to be. Because that's the other thing. Let me say one other thing. Let me say one last thing about that.
Yeah.
I'm joking when I say I ought to be, but I'm also serious.
Well, one thing you've always espoused is the notion of work. Like, it's work. It's a discipline.
Man. It's like it's not easy. That's the thing. I'm not scared of it, but you still have to commit. And this process of committing to doing it and everything that means, and you have to turn yourself inside out to do it. Right. That's part of the point of view thing. I mean, if you have something to say, but you got to really explore yourself. That's the process of these monologues too, right? What are you doing? I'm not consciously saying, what do I think about this? I'm in it. But when I'm in it, that's what's happening. I'm pulling from all different parts of myself to try. And
you have to accept that once you have to accept that that's a necessity of the work, and it may or may not land in the way you anticipate it to land in the world.
Right. That's the thing I admire about actors. That's so hard. I've acted enough that I know, and
you're a good actor too. I wish you'd do more of it.
Thank you. I enjoy it, but it's scary, and that's scary. Okay, it's scary, but also I'm not going to go chase. Someone has to ask me to do it. So, and I do have something. I know I'm going to do something in the next year because someone asked me recently. But
cool.
But I remember doing Michael Clayton, and that was frightening because at first, last thing I'll say. So you'll relate to this, I know, as an actor. So the night before or the weekend before, I was freaked out because I knew I was going to be in a scene with George Clooney. I didn't know him yet. We hadn't made Ocean's movie yet. And I was like, what if I suck? How am I? I haven't acted in so long. And how am I? And then all of a sudden, I realized, learn the words. If you have the words backward, here's your job. Learn all the words perfectly so you can't be distracted. Really know the text backwards and forwards. Spend the next 2 days obsessed with learning the text.
Yeah.
Put the wardrobe on that they give you. Learn the text. And then show up and put yourself in the director's hands. It's on him, not me. It's on me to be prepared. Think about the words, learn the words. And then whether I'm good or bad, that's up to that guy. He picked me. Now it's up to him. He picked me, he asked me to come. Now, and then I wasn't nervous. But when I got there and I'm sitting down and it's at a poker table and I had to do stuff, it was like, okay, breathe, man, because things that are so natural to me suddenly felt completely unnatural because of, and then, but having the words, I'll say this, having the words, remember, if you're an actor listening to this, don't listen to anybody who tells you it's more spontaneous to not know the words. That is fear. That's fear talking, because that is an excuse and an escape. No,
you need to know them. Anthony Hopkins says he looks at his lines 100 times. He runs them 100 times every scene, which I try to do too, because you need, in order to be present, you cannot be trying to recall a fucking line.
Damian Lewis walks around with a giant binder, and as much as I said about Paul, it's the same about Damian. And he walks around with a binder. I mean, you worked with him, and that guy was ready to go.
And I remember that day, because I had the gift of one of the Levien Koppleman monologues on that day, and I needed to know that left, right, and center too, because all of a sudden I'm working with Damian. I'm in this environment I've never been in, and I'm in a world that I don't know anything about, and and you just need to not, that cannot be something that you're leaning on during the scene. You have to find another way. You're
one of the only people who got the best of Bobby Axelrod.
That's true.
In the whole history of the show, you're one of the only people
who
got a better deal than Bobby Axelrod.
We had fun, man. Anyway, Brian.
All right, Sean, thanks, dude. This was great.
It means so much to me that you did this, buddy. I really, really appreciate it. I look forward to all the stuff you're doing out there.
I hope there's a lot more that you and I do down the road. And it's a pleasure being with you. And you're really good at this podcast thing. I'm glad you're doing it. I can't wait to go and listen to all the episodes of the pod. So thanks, Sean.
I appreciate it, man.